Robert.
Yeah, Joshua.
Hi, how are you doing?
Fine, how are you? Sorry I'm a bit late, I got stuck in traffic.
Oh, really? Oh, that's all right. I'm just sitting here waiting for your phone call, actually, staring out the window.
Uh-huh.
Are you enjoying your vacation after the world tour, or is it back to work?
Well, am I enjoying it? It's a very, very late spring here in Britain,
Mm-hmm.
so the weather's been foul, and I do miss the sort of Anglo-Egyptian camaraderie a little bit.
Right.
So, yeah, it's okay. I'll get used to it. A lot of tennis and I should be okay.
Right. I had a chance to interview Hassam Ramzi the other day, and
Uh-huh.
he was a very interesting man. He sent me his latest CD, and it's just enchanting. It's beautiful.
Yes, he's quite adept with the language.
Right. Very articulate man.
Mm-hmm.
So how did your relationship with Bill Curbishley start?
Up until about 1987, throughout the majority of the career that I had, or my singing after John Bonham passed away,
Uh-huh.
I preferred to look after my own affairs. I thought there was quite a lot for me to learn
Mm-hmm.
about what makes the whole thing work,
So you're-
and what the difference is between a manager who says he can do this and a manager who says he can do this and doesn't do anything at all.
Right. So you were actually
so-
managing yourself?
Yeah, kind of. I used to bring people in for help to put a tour together, or basically to put tours together.
I see.
So I dealt with musicians on my own. I'm a big boy. You know.
Uh-huh.
Oh, hang on, there's somebody banging on the door. Just a sec. Yeah, and there was a lot of things I wanted to know about. My whole sort of musical life had so many rapid and colourful turns in the previous 10 or 12 years
Uh-huh.
before, 1980.
Right.
I figured that I should learn a lot about what was going on.
I see.
I only found out after Bill became my manager that Ahmet Ertegun once said to me, it's impossible to deal with an artist when he represents himself, because you can't tell him that his product is shit.
Right.
And obviously there's a kind of subtle interplay between record company and artist. No matter what,
Uh-huh.
they generally support you. Well, I've been supported very well by what was the Atlantic family.
Right.
And
So,
so, yeah, I guess it was kind of tough, but I wanted to see what was going on everywhere. I wanted to know how the whole thing worked properly,
mm-hmm.
because, I made my mind up that this was it forever, really, singing.
Right.
And apart from the fact that I'd never actually come across an A&R man, which was probably the greatest horror of all horrors,
Right.
I thought, well, there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to know about, and there's a lot of questions to ask, and I've got to learn and start learning straight away.
I see.
So up until about 87, I'd put out, picked the 11 Principle of Moment, Shaken and Stirred Honey Drippers, about 4 albums.
I see.
And basically, I couldn't kick the door down if I didn't think it was being handled right, and I didn't get all the kind of managerial input. So I was really I was kind of in the Atlantic Ocean in a canoe.
So, do you think that that's a problem with a lot of management, is that they kind of curtail to the artists and not really tell them if their album is shit? I mean...
Well, the thing is that nobody goes out to make a bad record.
Right.
There's so many interpretations of what a successful record is.
Mm-hmm.
And my idea of a successful record is a record that is aesthetically pleasing and is the greatest possible achievement that any artist and, I guess, contributors can put together at any point in time. So the commercial aspects of making records have not really been a consideration to me.
I see.
So I don't think that anybody makes a shit record. I think that an artist needs so many things from a manager. There's a sort of psychological input required. I mean, the artist is always hopping from foot to foot,
Mm-hmm.
never really knowing whether something's finished, whether a song is complete, whether this, whether that.
I see.
It's very seldom that you can turn around and say, yeah, that's it, I've done it. So,
Right.
management, it's a very subtle issue. I mean, during Led Zeppelin, we just got on and did whatever we had to do. It was a magical time,
Uh-huh.
and the combination of the input musically and personality-wise and aesthetically seemed to work
Mm-hmm.
without any comment from anybody anywhere.
Right.
But times change, and circumstances, and I guess the treatment of the whole animal changes as the years go by.
Right.
So when it got to about 87, Rex King, who had been my friend for a long time and had been my tour manager and always will be,
Mm-hmm.
had some dealings with Bill Curbishley through exaggerations with The Who
Oh, I see.
and stuff like that. And he said to me one day, he said, you shouldn't do it all yourself. You're too much of a control freak. You should sit back at times
Uh-huh.
and let somebody who's strong and, really, really straight and well-meaning
Uh-huh.
help you out. And I said, but I'm very, very wary of letting anything go.
Right.
And because all the managers, well, 90% of the managers that I'd seen were they were quite flaky.
It's hard to put your trust in one person.
Well, I saw a lot of guys who were purporting to be managers who basically were taking their percentage, and their artists were pretty much in the dark as to what was going on,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of managers turn out to be bigger stars than the artists. I mean, the whole game is so, it's such a perverted game anyway.
Right. Right.
That I was quite cagey about talking to anybody about anything. And but anyway, I met Bill, and I liked him. I liked the fact that he was quite reserved, and he deliberated a lot
Mm-hmm.
on in general conversation, and what he had to say when he said it. He put a lot of thought behind it.
I see.
And
So was there...
also the fact that anybody who can deal with Pete Townsend, and that whole sort of Roger Daltrey, Pete Townsend, John Entwistle situation,
Uh-huh.
where you've got three very, very, very different personalities who all wanted very different things.
Right.
Anybody who can hold the candle to that many devils at one go without breaking into a sweat had obviously got a little more of the scheme of things than a lot of the other managers that were around. And taking into account that the musical idioms of the time were supporting bands and musicians and artists that were pretty flimsy and very affected by style and fashion of the time, which was not my forte, really.
I see.
The musical styles were, you'd gone through the sort of new romantic Duran Duran,
Uh-huh.
Tears for Fears, the whole projection of pop into the kind of pseudo hard rock stuff, which was basically, to me, just like a bunch of Bobby V songs with a heavy metal guitar. So really, I mean, I was kind of adrift in the middle of all that kind of musical movement.
I see.
And I guess I didn't want to play that game, obviously, because it is a game, and I didn't want to
Right.
cover Supreme songs or stuff like that. I didn't want it to be like anything will do, just get my name up there.
Yeah. So was managing yourself taking away from the artistic side of your of the business of you making music?
Not really, no. I think what it was making it very difficult to deal one-to-one with the musicians I was working with, because there are certain times when you have to, when the artist decides this is it,
Mm-hmm.
and if you have too much democracy, too much of a kind of a forum of minds, then if you try to please everybody, the record's never finished.
Right.
The tour never begins. There's so many sort of everybody's entitled to an opinion, but the best thing to do is to let me have the opinion and talk everybody else round to it.
Right, right.
And take in any valid comments that are to be made. And the only way to do that really is having a third party, such as Bill.
Uh-huh.
And so Bill and I talked, and the conversations were good and very forward-thinking. And he said that I should subscribe to a little thing that I'd forgotten about called a chorus.
Mm-hmm.
And I should think about singing songs that people could actually hum when they were walking down the street.
Right.
And I said, well, that's never affected me before. Why should I start now? But the truth to tell, really, I'd had so many sort of moments when I was dogged by the kind of whole legendary status of the previous music.
Right.
That I'd almost got a kind of allergy to the idea of getting too tough musically, too reflective musically.
I see.
And really, I needed some kind of cathartic experience to try and get myself back on the track where I actually could perform best.
I see.
And he kind of walked me through all that and got me to get rid of the old devils and to reappraise what I do and to make it a little less intense and a little more focused.
I see. So was there a pronounced change in your career or your music then after he started managing you?
Well, yeah, I think so, because Now and Then was the first collection of songs that I worked on and released after the beginning of the relationship. And it was much more lighthearted and much more to the point, talk cool, one ship of fools.
Right, right.
Stuff like that was instantly, it gave me a different platform from which I could work. And it also pleased Bill because there were obviously bits and pieces on that Now and Then album that drew in, that embraced the past to some degree, and at the same time allowed me to work with new musicians with great ideas, and to do tracks which I'm really proud of, still like White, Clean and Neat.
Right, that's one of my favorite songs of yours, actually.
Yeah, well, I mean, if now is the time to re-record that with a proper drum kit instead of all that stupid computerized shit.
Right, right.
And get an orchestra on it, and really, I mean, to me, it's a very important song. It's very reflective. It's my childhood. It's the whole deal about music and the way that the English parental generation looked upon the whole thing as being something that would pass by and had no real relevance socially. And so there were great moments for me. They were kind of trade-offs, whereas a couple of the things were a bit sort of sweet. I was also able to go and vanish off and go into more exciting and unknown waters. And it was the beginning of a relationship with the musicians who went on to make Manic Nirvana and, to some degree, Fate of Nations.
I see.
With everybody moving around the nucleus, which is Bill's personality and his flexibility to be able to fend off all the dramas that were going to take place.
So how is his style different from Peter Grant's?
Well, I guess the style, everybody's style changes, or everybody's personality careeristically will change as the temperature and the climate of the music changes. Led Zeppelin was born in a period where radio and the whole concept of music as entertainment wasn't so disposable. American radio then was the triumph of world radio for young people, because radio stations weren't really controlled by their main sponsors. So a lot of really effective radio stations were in existence in America at that time who would play everything back to back. You'd have Led Zeppelin, Ravi Shankar, the incredible string band Hendrix, Gary Puckett and the Union Gap. There'd be such a kind of a convergence of style. which meant that we didn't care about whether or not it made radio, or it didn't do this, or it didn't do that, or it didn't appeal to anybody, because the whole idea of keeping radio safe and formulated wasn't there then. So I guess that we did whatever we wanted, and Peter Grant basically made sure that nobody trod on us, and that we could work without hindrance from any forces at all. I think Bill Curbishley operates in the same way, but he's much more aware of how corporate the music industry has become.
Right.
And therefore, he plays a lot of the games that I couldn't even get near, because I would throw up and be incredibly ill.
Right.
All over major executives.
So do you think it's
So Bill knows he possesses the tact and the patience to act as a kind of catalyst between myself and all the changing personnel. I mean, when you think about the way that major labels now, the main sort of key people are moving constantly. So it's quite possible for an artist to make a record under the auspices of a certain guy who gives them 100% support, morally and in whatever other way, and then before the record's released, the guy's gone to another label, and the new guy who takes over doesn't give a flying fuck about it. A lot of records get lost and all that sort of thing. People are on the move all the time. There's a lot of careeristic people out there. I don't think it was quite as frantic in the earlier days. So Bill basically he plays the game as it's got to be played, and he takes a lot of the stress and the strain from that side of the game away from us.
I see. Now, were you involved in Jimmy Page's decision to be managed by Bill?
No.
No.
No, but it would be ludicrous to have a whole series of managers all over the place. When Jimmy and I were both of the same inclination, that we knew exactly what we wanted to do. Plus, as far as I was concerned, Jimmy wasn't getting the kind of service that he needed at the position that he was in his career.
I see. So is Bill's strategy different now that you're back with Jimmy as opposed to when you were a solo artist?
Well, his patience is tried twice as much. He does tend to sort of dream of the green heaven a lot more than I ever remember him dreaming of it before. I mean, sometimes I think he needs more counseling than I do these days. I've kind of worn him down quite a bit. I was wrestling with whether or not even playing Led Zeppelin songs was an atrocity, and and the fact that I have quite a powerful imagination and the capacity to write songs, and maybe every time I make a new record, I should just leave everybody behind and start again.
Right.
Musicians-wise, just to try and keep something really fresh and imaginative and off the wall. So Bill's been, his situation with the two of us has been at least twice as difficult, or twice as arduous. But he's managed it very well, and we're all still very, very happy in our partnerships.
I see.
Of course, he always used to laugh and joke about me being awkward and eclectic and didn't want to do this and didn't want to do that, and was basically ready to walk away from success in order to make some kind of sub-talk album as far as accessibility goes. And when the two of us are together, Jimmy and I, he's looking at us and going, he could deal with each of us separately. To try and get us together is sometimes quite difficult. And Jimmy and I, as a duo, carry quite a different vibration, I guess, than the two of us individually and the two of us apart.
I see. Did he push the reunion at all to you two?
Well, it's quite obvious that, I mean, I knew this, and Jimmy knew this, and Bill knew this, and everybody knew this, that Jimmy and I had written a lot of great stuff, albeit some of it with John Paul Jones and John Bonham. But as a kind of combination of personality and energy, we were capable of doing all manner of things, which obviously we weren't doing when we were apart. He often used to say to me that there was something so natural about the two of us working together, it's ridiculous not to do it.
Right.
And I used to say, yeah, but I mean, you know, you've only got one life, and there's thousands of songs yet to be written, and I didn't really know whether or not I wanted to be back on the wagon. I certainly didn't want to make it into Led Zeppelin and bring John Paul Jones into the picture and another drummer and try and relive it exactly as it was, because these are different times, and I wanted to really make that very evident from the first piece of music that we should do together, which I think we did.
Right.
Albeit they were old songs, a bunch of them, you know.
Right.
There was some new stuff, there was obviously some sparkle there, and by the time I dragged Bill into the Moroccan desert and he was trapping quietly behind a bunch of Gnawa faith healers, he was understanding that if Jimmy and I were to work together, we'd have to go into the extremes musically that we'd been to way back.
I see.
Because the success of Led Zepp wasn't built on it just being what everybody knows and loves.
Right.
So he understood that, and quite often he had to be the sort of talking stone, I guess, for both of us, because I hadn't been used to actually including anybody else in a decision, really. Another musician, I'd kind of gone, yeah, and then gone, no, I don't want to do that. So working as a partnership was very difficult for me initially, because I like to make a snap decision, get on with it, and do it.
Right.
And so he was encouraging it, because he knew that nothing ventured, nothing gained. That there was obviously still a chink there, a little chink of light.
Right.
And that I'd been working constantly, up until my meetings with Jimmy. I was on a world tour with the Play the Nations record, which to me was probably my best collection of songs recorded in the most empathetic way for me. You know, a lot more acoustic input and stuff like that. A lot more, quite a bit of leaning towards Arabian stuff within the record.
I see.
Using various musicians. I felt very flexible.
I see.
So he said, well, look, why don't you work with Jimmy for a bit and see how it goes? And I said, yeah, okay, but I have been on the road now for about 2 or 3 years. That was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But I tried it out, and it was really good. And obviously there were areas, unspoken areas, where there's no need for conversation, dialogue, or anything, where we kicked right back into some kind of unknown little, I suppose, vein of musicality, which was very pleasing. And I mean, ultimately, by the time with the aid of Hossam, by the time that we'd got a little ensemble together and we were reinventing some of the old songs, it was truly, in rehearsal stages, it was an incredibly moving and celebratory and happy time.
Ah.
So really, doing Friends and Four Sticks and Kashmir and stuff like that, songs that I could never have done on my own and wouldn't have dreamt of touching, suddenly they had a validity and they had a new life. And I think a lot of the triumph behind that goes to Bill's perseverance, especially with me, that I should, share the mantle again.
Right. So do you think if you hadn't brought in the Egyptian rhythms to rework the songs, do you think some of the magic might have been lost?
Well, if we didn't have a new way of doing it, there would be no point in doing it. So it wouldn't have happened at all.
I see.
It wouldn't have happened in the form that it did. I mean, we've written a lot of new stuff, and we had, during the process of preparing that whole No Quarter thing, as a four-piece with Michael and Charlie, we wrote a lot of new stuff, which is very strong, powerful four-piece music. So if the Egyptian thing hadn't have worked, obviously the unplugged, unleaded, whatever the shit name was, wouldn't have happened, and we'd have put out a brand new record, I guess.
I see. So, was the Unleaded thing something that Bill, you know, did he say to you, hey, you know, this is a good way to kind of break back into the you know, the stream of things, or was that, whose idea was that?
Well, it was understood what it would do. Whether it was a success or a failure, it would make people aware of the fact that we do still talk, Jimmy and I. And more than that, we can still play. I think really it was quite obvious that, I mean, I'd been invited by MTV to do that program. And I knew that doing Zeppelin songs on stage is one thing, but actually taking the credit for them on TV and on record is not really fair.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense, and they would be that much more inferior because of the lack of Jimmy's presence. So obviously once I was invited into it, it seemed an ideal time to see whether or not Jimmy and I could actually make it work again.
I see.
And Bill was obviously very sensitive to the way I felt about not trading on the past too much. There were times when I thought the entire project was a compromise for me, but at the same time, because it had the merits it did, and because it was quite different, and because nobody else has ever traveled with an Egyptian ensemble in stadium rock, with hurdy-gurdies and God knows what, the whole deal really did seem to have some relevance.
I see.
And putting it all together and making it work and actually getting the whole deal underway and dealing with all the different personalities and the Egyptian Middle Eastern mentality as far as touring and the hierarchy of the whole deal and who's in charge and who's not, and was something that was left really entirely to Bill.
I see. And he toured with you everywhere?
This time he did, yeah. I mean, occasionally, when I first worked with him, he was with me all the time, and then Manic Nirvana and Fate of Nations, he had The Who on the road for a while, doing that, whatever it was, with the brass, the saxes and stuff like that.
I see.
But he's been with us, with Jimmy and I, he's probably only missed 2 or 3 shows.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He's become very conversant in Spanish, and he certainly has opened up in many, many respects. I mean, and also I think I felt quite insecure if he hadn't have been there, because the whole thing was such a big animal on a touring level that somebody somewhere had to be king.
I see. I see. Have you had a chance to hear any of Trinifold's new acts, newly signed young acts?
Tell me the names of them and I'll tell you.
Typhoon Genies.
Yes, brilliant.
Really?
Really, really, really. Typhoon Genie is very, very, very good. There's a girl called Toni Halliday who sings with them. She sang on a couple of my albums, just doing backing vocals, and she's got the most remarkable voice.
I see.
Yeah, it sounds really, really tough. It sounds somewhere between P.J. Harvey and the Buzzcocks. I think it's very, very good.
So, obviously, Bill not only can manage, he's still signing new acts, so obviously there's something there that some talent he has that most people don't, I guess.
Well, I don't know. I mean, since I've been with Bill, I've seen other managers at work, and I've had coffee with other musicians who've got managers, but their managers aren't quite so hands-on. But then again, I mean, with the new bands that are around, the Oasis, P.J. Harvey, people like that, who knows? I mean, I don't know much about their management setup.
Right.
You know, if I was managing Oasis, I think I'd probably get the handcuffs out.
They're everywhere, huh?
Well, yeah, thank God.
Yeah.
I think.
But what do you mean about the handcuffs, then?
Well, you know, occasionally you've got to get people to chill out. The whole idea of being successful and being big and being seen everywhere doesn't mean to say that the way that you have to, there's got to be a little bit of decorum in the projection of some of these guys.
I see.
You know, and that's about the most subtle way I can put it.
Another one of our writers did an interview with Ahmet Erdogan, and he said about Bill, if I had to leave my family and all my money to someone to take care of, if I were going away for 6 months, I would have total faith and confidence in Bill Curbishley as a friend. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I'd even go for 8. Sure.
Really?
I mean, yeah, because, I mean, it goes beyond just a musical thing here, you know?
Uh-huh.
I mean, Bill and I have become very much like sparring partners and brothers too, you know? Because, I mean, if I don't agree with what he's got to say, it's very, very simple to just front it out and have have 5 minutes tension and then straighten everything out completely, because the most important thing to remember is that really the artist, no matter how vague and twitchy, really is asking for a service from people.
I see.
You know, I mean, it's like, you know, you're paying people primarily in the cold light of day to do the best for you.